right, and welcome back. This is our first conversation for this morning, and if you have any questions or want to have questions answered about all things agriculture, supplies, control, well, we have the guys on set, the men on set that could answer those questions for you. We have joining us the CEO in the Ministry of Agriculture, Food Security and Enterprise, Servula Baiza, as well as my brother from Supplies Controller, Mr. Lennox Nicholson. Good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
All right.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Perhaps we could start with a general overview of the agriculture sector, one of the primary sectors in our country. I think the SIB reported some very encouraging statistics recently for the second quarter. I think we saw over $100 million in GDP growth compared to second quarter in 2023. And the primary sector was one of the sectors that drove this growth. And if I'm not mistaken, agriculture is part of that primary sector, or largely involved in that primary sector. Let's talk a bit about it.
Okay. Well, certainly, Paul. And good morning to everybody. The agricultural sector has certainly transformed from 2020 up to now. I think our farmers have gained a lot of confidence, and so we see that the agricultural sector is in a rebound right now. Mm-hmm. If you want to look at the traditional sector and the non-traditional, in our traditional sector, we still have some challenges. I mean, when we talk about sugar, for instance, there has been a decrease in production, in production for this year. We barely made 1 million. We barely were able to mill 1 million tons of sugar cane. Normally we would be about 1.2. I think that was what we were before. The mill actually should be able to do 1.5, but production-wise this year we were at about 1 million, which should give us about 100,000 tons of sugar. So that's in terms of sugar cane. In terms of bananas again is also on the rebound. I saw the figures up to the mid-year. I think we're almost halfway as to what was the estimate. I think they're looking at about 4 million boxes of bananas. Mm-hmm. The one that we still are struggling, is citrus, which I think we're looking at barely about 400,000 boxes of fruit. No? Again, many challenges with disease, labor, and so forth. No? Well, the non-traditional sector, the other things that we look at, we see that those are the areas that we feel that a lot has gone into that. For instance, down in PG, right now, one of the successes of our ministry, along with the Belize Marketing Development Corporation, is the revival of the rice industry in PG. Last year, we had production about 1.9 million tons of paddy. This year, we're looking at 3 million tons of paddy, almost doubling the production. And we feel that next year, we will even have more. A greater increase in production.
What do you guys account for that success?
I think it's really the support and the interest that we have been putting into our farmers. Okay. Previously, there was none. We have bought equipment to assist the farmers in land preparation, in pest control. We increased the price for the paddy also, so the farmers are getting more money for their product. We had to do that twofold because we had to compete to be with the Guatemalans, for instance. The Guatemalans come up to the actual farm to buy the product from the farmers. And certainly we need to up to our game to make sure that we have enough production for the mill to function properly. So we have an increase in rice. We have an increase, I think, in non-traditionals, what we call non-traditionals. We've been doing a lot of work with our farmers in terms of our vegetable productions, the horticultural section. What people call the winter vegetables. We don't have any winter, but we call it the season for production. As you know, we have onions. We are producing onions, potatoes, a lot of the other vegetables that we consume. We've had many challenges. I mean, there's a lot of, I would say, in terms of consistency of supply and even consistency of quality. We always have an issue at the beginning of the season and at the end of the season. So those are the areas that I think we need to do more. But certainly there's an increase in production of our vegetables. Again, it's not an easy area because you have weather, you have pests. In agriculture, there's always something that affects you. And it's damn if you do and damn if you don't. If either the weather is affecting you, so it affects your production, or you have too good of weather that everybody produces a lot, and then you have surplus, and that drives down the price. And so there's always a challenge in agriculture.
There seems to be a case that you have to be prepared for everything and anything. Mr. Nicholas, let's get you in the conversation and the work that you do. What is an update that you have for us?
Well, sure. You will know that there has been some issues with the supply of flour. Now, we don't work for ADM. So in the normal course of things, it would be the responsibility of the mill to come out and explain to their customers what has been driving those difficulties. But absent that, we recognize that there was an issue with the supply of sugar. Our understanding is that the mill went offline for a period of time. Flour, sorry. Flour. The mill went offline for a period of time, and that affected the supplies. As at Thursday, the supply situation has started to ease. When we did our checks on Friday, in the north, most places had some type of flour, either Spring Up, which is imported by ADM, the Bibe Agua, which is locally produced, or the Bola Roja flour. Belize City had been adequately supplied as of Friday, and Belmopan was looking good as well. So one of the tools at our disposal to bring some relief to the particular situation had to do with our approval of import licenses for these products. We tried to expedite the approval process for those, and we also gave priority to the release that we do at customs for flour when they were imported, right? So the elements of the supply mechanism that were within our control, we did what we had to do to try and bring relief by way of expediting the importation that ADM does of the Spring Up flour, as well as the authorized importers for the Bola Roja. We tried to keep things moving to bring some relief to the supply situation.
So I understand that, as you mentioned, the issue of flour is almost a bit outside of the ministry's purview and the work that you do. You don't control the mill there.
Right.
So perhaps let's take the conversation to sugar then, because it seems that it has been recurring where consumers are saying sugar shot or sugar scarce, and there's been several reasons accounted for these issues. It's either issues with the sugarcane industry or persons selling sugar outside of the country. What are things that have been put in place to address these issues?
Right. So enforcement-wise, and again, we reported some time ago, and instead of saying who the entities were that were not doing what they were supposed to do, we actually reported on the entities that were actually, we actually had documentation that they were supplying the market. We started that program again. We have started to engage some of these distributors, and unfortunately, the entities that we see supplying the market during this round of intervention is the same entities that we used to see back then. Now, we have had communication with the mill, because they are the ones who actually control who sell and who get quotas to distribute sugar. So we do engage with them from time to time in terms of what we're finding in the market, and they in turn also from time to time do share some information with us, and I know that they have made some adjustments to the list of entities that are granted quotas to distribute sugar. But from our perspective, we are looking at potential adjustments to regulations to give us some additional wherewithal particularly to address this situation in the distributor segment of the supply chain. So those are things that we're looking at, and we continue to be in the market to identify those entities that are actually supplying the market.
What percentage of sugar goes to the local market that is produced up north?
About 15%.
15%. That should be sufficient, correct?
Yes. Well, if you look at the sugar industry in Belize, it's a little bit different from the one, the sugar industry in Guatemala or the sugar industry in Mexico. Their production of sugar is mainly for local consumption. Right? In our case, our production is mainly for export. So where we produce 100,000 tons of sugar, only 15% of that is for local consumption. The rest is exported, whether it be as direct consumption sugar or as raw sugar. So only a small portion is actually consumed in the country because of our size of population.
Yeah.
Right? So for us, it's a bit and for us, it puts us at an advantage and disadvantage. One, well, we should have enough to supply our local market, but it's a disadvantage because then the price that the sugar we have a price control on the sugar, and so it's not market driven. So that's why you have that in Guatemala, for instance, the price is almost, I think, twice or three times the price that our consumers pay, and the same thing in Mexico. And so the biggest issue or problem that we have with our sugar is that it's being smuggled across the border.
Yeah.
So whatever we let out into the market is being smuggled across the border. So I think the work that the suppliers control unit and really the mill, we have to work very closely with the mill, is to ensure that who the mill is selling is for distribution in the local market. Because again, for you to export sugar, you need a license.
Yeah.
So those people who are exporting, I mean,
Or
again, it's
smuggling
illegal. It's an informal. It's illegal because they don't have a license.
What makes it difficult to catch them at the border?
I can load up let's say, a person can load up a truck, go to the border, and how do you know they're going to smuggle it across the border?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of sugar, right? If you load up the truck.
But it's not illegal. The problem is that it's not illegal.
To buy sugar in Belize and then take it over.
Take it up to the border. You'd have to catch you in the act of actually crossing it.
Okay.
And it's, the semantics about it. I can take my sugar for a ride up to the border and bring it back.
So then, are there any conversations?
Those are the difficulties in terms of.
Well, then are there any conversations happening with border control personnel on how to potentially meet this challenge?
Yes, at the operational level, we do have those conversations, and you see, what happened is that we have always had a pretty decent handle on the mill aspect of it. SICB, there's information there, and because we are in the retail market, we also have had good information about what is happening in that sector. It is that intermediate stage where, for the most part, for quite a while, there's a gap in information in terms of who is doing what, and that is the key information gap that we are seeking to close. You see? So, and like I mentioned to you, we are looking at perhaps regulatory options as well that we can propose that can help to close some of those gaps, right? Because even at the border points and the border control aspect, you need to know who the players are and how the product moves through the distribution chain in order for you to be effective.
Are stores permitted to ration these products when there's a shortage?
Right. Well, technically, no. You're not supposed to put conditions on the sale of a good that is price controlled, right?
£1 per family, £5 per
but
family.
You see, but enforcement-wise, you need to be careful how you address it, because what you do not want to do is have a situation where your enforcement action actually make the problem worse. You see? So if I were to go to a fairly large retailer and I find that they're doing certain restrictions saying £5 per family, etc., the key element there is not necessarily to bring down the hammer on that retailer there and then. We have a conversation, how much product do you normally get? And then he bring out his old invoices and he shows me that normally he's supplied with 100 sacks of product per week. And then he shows me his current invoices and he's only being supplied with 40 sacks per week. And then we look at who his traditional supplier is and who his current supplier is, right? And find out if that entity that used to supply him with 100 still has a quota and why. So then you understand? So when you look at it, you want to identify which point in the distribution chain is actually the source of the problem. Yeah. Or else you'll be dealing with the symptom as opposed to the problem. And remember, I indicated to you what one of the key things we need to do is close that information gap on that distributor section. And cooperation with the retailers is actually essential in doing that. So we don't want to hammer him to a point where instead of being able to supply some product to 500 customers, he's only able to supply a significant amount of product to 10 customers, right? So in enforcement, you have to look at the particular situation and make a decision, what is the best approach to take overall to bring a resolution to the particular problem that you're facing.
Now, as CEO, I want to make good use of our time, and so we're not going to spend a lot of time on one topic because we have a few more to touch on, but I want to take things back out to the broader picture in terms of Belize being self-sufficient or self-sustainable where food is concerned. Where are we with that, and what's the prospects of us being the breadbasket of the Caribbean or the region per se, because you speak about growth in several sectors? This seems promising to me.
Yeah. Let me touch first the one in terms of food security. We are the only, I think, country in the Caribbean and the CARICOM that does not need to import any kind of meats. We are self-sufficient in poultry, pork, and even beef. And we have the sea that gives us abundance of fish. We do not need to import any grain. We produce enough beans, rice, corn, soybean. We don't need to import any of these. We used to, 2 years ago, I believe, we used to import soybean. We don't need to import soybean anymore. So we're sufficient in all our meats and we're sufficient in all our grains. We're the only country who can boast about that.
Wow.
In fact, we export. We're able to export.
That's good.
In terms of CARICOM, I think our biggest problem, our biggest part is logistics. How to get our products out there. That is one of our biggest problems. I think some of our farmers have been trying, but it's proven a bit difficult. And then you still have some barriers to trade. For instance, I know Quality Poultry has been trying very hard to get into the market in Grenada. And I mean, it's just been very difficult. And we brought it up to CARICOM, we brought it up to Quartet, and so on. And in fact, today, actually, there's a group,
a delegation
from the CARICOM Secretariat doing a site visit to Quality Poultry to look at our production and to see why is it that we're having so much problems. Hopefully that helps us out. But in terms of our growth and so on, in terms of because of our small population, for us to be able to jump into exporting, I think we have to look at our neighbors. At this point right now, we have to look at our neighbors. That is why we're pursuing a partial scope agreement with Guatemala. We're trying to finalize one with El Salvador, and we're looking at Mexico. We have huge consumers, number of consumers or populations are right around us.
Millions.
Millions, exactly. So my minister says, only give me Quintana Roo and he's happy. We can supply them with everything.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, from beef, shrimp, we have it. I mean, our importation right now, to a large extent, to our neighboring countries is informal, unfortunately. So we have to try to make it formal. So that is why these agreements are very important. We were on a visit just the other day, again, Minister and myself, we went up to Halakte. One, because we have this threat of the screw worm, and so we wanted to see the checkpoint out there and to see. Our greatest threat will be things coming in informal. And that is one of our greatest, I would say, one of the points of greatest concern. But we were there and we were able to discuss with some of the people who are involved in trade right across the border. And I'll be honest with you, even I wasn't aware of the amount of trade that is involved with Guatemala through that point. To the extent that we met one of the traders who does chickens, I think he does also pork.
Informally.
Informally, yes, that goes through there. But the chicken, for instance, I was surprised. He has an arrangement with a producer right here in the country that produces for him. Every week, chicken is being transported over to Guatemala from here.
People are finding a way.
But how does informal trade take place for persons who wouldn't know, like myself?
We don't, unfortunately, at Halakte, I want to call it Halakte, but there's Three Tops, whatever at that particular, we don't have a formal border to cross into Guatemala.
Okay.
There is a crossing, like there are many crossings, our border is so porous. But that one in particular, to a certain extent, we recognize it, that's why there is a booth, there's immigration, there's Baja. I think there should be customs. I didn't see customs. I didn't see customs there. I think they have to call them or something. But for goods going out, it's pretty much simple. I mean, it's I want to call it simple, but it's pretty much straightforward. We don't stop trade going out. I mean, that's for us is as an export. As an export, we don't stop it. It's the same thing like cattle walking across the border by bullet tree.
Okay.
It's an export. We see I think the difficulties comes in formalizing the money exchange. I think that's where the greatest fear or concern is. But once we get invoices and foreign currencies, I think that's where we need. That's the area I think that needs to be formalized.
Yeah.
Because it poses a threat.
Yeah.
I want to take the conversation to something that was presented on the news last week, where it was announced that a permit approval was given to Goliath Investment Company. It was approved and then paused for 10,000 cases of corona beer into Belize. Now, this caused major concerns between breweries Bowen & Bowen and Caribbean International. What was the involvement of this ministry in that permit?
Take a stab at it first.
Take a stab at it.
To take a stab at it.
Well, let us come again, but what I want to say that, we have, Mr. Nicholson will give, I guess, more details. But the approach was made to the ministry by the importer, saying that, we would want to see if we can import this product. As a ministry, our policy has always been we want to support local production. But there are cases where, there are many cases where we import so many things that can be produced here. I can start off with milk, meats, cheese. We produce, but we still import because of the demand. And I guess the idea of people, one of the things that's always shown to me, that people want to have choice, that people need choice.
People will have to go. Even
So,
though we produce cheese, for example.
or the mozzarella that we produce here is not good enough for the pizza, so you want to import mozzarella. The beef that we produce here is not soft, it's too hard, so we need to import beef. We get a request from everything, from A to Z. So when this thing came up and looking at it, and the tourism sector specifically, which is one of the areas that we do, I would say, get a lot of demands for importation from. So we said, well, since we have all of this, I said, I spoke to Mr. Nicholson and told him, look at it, make sure, if we could come up with a pilot program or whatever, a trial, let's see what we can do. And then he can explain to you what his unit did.
So there's something I want to disabuse, a misconception I want to disabuse people of. There's this misconception that beer has never been imported from Mexico before, and that is not so. I shared with CEO that
Formally. 'Cause
formally, there was
We all know.
there was a quantity of Miller beer that was imported into this jurisdiction from Mexico some years ago. I had gotten into some hot water over it because my protectionist instincts are quite acute, no? And I had raised certain concerns about it, and so that has happened. This country has imported beer from as far afield as China before.
Wow.
Okay, so just for the record, right? I want that to be said. There was a concept that it was the first time that we had ever done anything to approve a license for product coming from a country outside of CARICOM, and that's not quite the case. I mentioned 2 instances. Now, one of the key things that we did when the matter was brought to us is that what we did was to look at those transactions and establish what the landed cost was for the products at the time. Because as the CEO mentioned, we are pro-local production. So when we looked at when these things come to us, the important thing for us to establish is, would that product be offered at a price point that would pose significant competitive threat to the local producer?
Yes.
And I think some numbers have been thrown out in terms of over $100 per case and so on. So when we examine the transaction from the Miller situation and from the Chinese beer situation, we were comfortable that the price point was such that it would create a degree of buffer. And I will tell you that these things come to my desk quite often, but they die a natural death. I don't send them to the CEO, right? Again, the protectionist instincts, but also that one of the things that is often absent is a mechanism that would allow enforcement authorities to identify the legitimately imported product from the product that are imported contraband.
Yes, and that's one of the concerns.
So because practically all the proposals or requests that normally come to us lack that particular element, we don't normally give it any sort of consideration at all. And the CEO can tell you in this instance, there was a requirement on the importer that if this product is to come into this jurisdiction, there has to be a clear mechanism to identify what product was produced or imported for this market as opposed to what would have come in informally. So I want to assure our local producers that it was not a decision taken lightly. It was not a hurry come up thing without giving due consideration to their interests, because we are pro-local producers as well, and all of those factors were taken into consideration within the ministry.
So why was the permit ultimately
Paused.
put on pause, or is it completely off the table now?
It was put on pause, it was put on hold because, I felt that we still hadn't really, that the importer had shown us that he would have that market label on each bottle saying, Belize market and so forth. I think what Mr. Nicholson was explaining to me was that the import point at the beginning, I think the importer applied for 10,000 cases.
Actually, he applied for 4 licenses of 10,000 each,
Yeah.
Okay.
and only one.
The explanation for the amount is because he needed to show the company where he's buying from the product. So see, I have the license, so that would be able to show them that for them to make the investment to put the label then on each bottle.
Because
the
there's
Belize
a cost.
Because there's a cost to that. I mean, nobody will put that for 100 Ks. Nobody will make that investment for 100 Ks or 1,000 Ks. But if you show that you have, then that would have made them comply with our requisite that you have to have on each bottle Belize market and who's importing it and so forth. So I understand why the importer wanted that particular. It was not that he would bring in that amount right now, but for him to be able to do so, to fulfill the requirement, that is what he needed to do.
People are saying they want options as well in the country. People are saying they want more than what we have here. I honestly hear people saying that.
And to go back to a point that Lennox mentioned, I mean, we import beer from all over, or well, at some point, whatever. But a lot of beer that is in the market is imported. I mean, Red Stripe, Heineken, those are
Guinness.
those are all imported. So, granted, it might be from a CARICOM country, which makes that imported beer pay less taxes and duties and so forth. If you were to import, in this case, the Corona beer, they would pay all their taxes, and or we would. One of the requirements was that they pay all their duties and so forth, because it's not a CARICOM country. So they would have to do that, and that is what would drive up the price for their product up to over $100
Yeah.
per case. No?
And perhaps $10 for a bottle when it hits the market or more.
Yeah. Well, if you are targeting the tourism sector, I think some resorts already sell you a Bellikin for 5
$6
US
Yes.
or 6 US.
Yeah.
So so maybe that was, I guess, the fear. I'm not too sure. I mean, personally, to be honest with you, I don't even like Corona.
Yeah.
My go-to beer right now is Ultra.
It's
Not to
nice.
have to mind it.
Well, gentlemen, as we wind down this segment and run out of time, really, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Well, I want to really congratulate our farmers who are doing an excellent job, I think, in terms of producing for our country, for providing us with that food security, which our ministry represents. There certainly is a lot more that we need to do, and certainly we hope that we can get the buy-in from the public to buy Belize and to buy products from Belize and to recognize that when we are buying things from outside, especially contraband, it's really hurting the farmers and hurting everyone. You don't even know what it is that you're buying when you're buying contraband.
Yes.
And the amount of pesticides and insects that are in these products. Especially to our cane farmers in the north, I think we didn't touch about the Commission of Inquiry, but it's still in process. Our commissioners have one more visit to do later this month in October, and we're hoping that we would be getting our report by the end of November. So hopefully this year, our crop will start on time in December, and we don't have too many hiccups. So even this issue about sugar being scarce, we're hoping that this year that will not happen.
Yes, okay. Any final thoughts?
So I think we're
Covered everything, CEO. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you guys all the best.
Sure,
Thank you.
All right, we are going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll be chatting with folks from Toastmasters. They're going to be talking to us about leadership opportunities. Stay with us. We'll be right back.